for joining us. In your time period covering NASCAR, kind of what sense did you get of who Kyle Busch was in that world?
I can still remember clear as day the first race that I covered. It was the 2023 Coca-Cola 600. It was a race that Denny Hamlin won. And I grew up in North Carolina. I grew up in Raleigh. And so NASCAR and racing was always in the atmosphere. However, I wasn't a full-fledged race fan. And I remember covering that race, going out into the infield during driver introductions, and our columnist, Scott Fowler, uh, while the drivers were getting introduced, kind of gave like two or three sentences about what each driver is known for and stuff like this. And the moment that Kyle Busch came out, Scott Fowler says, he's NASCAR's villain right now. He is, and every sport needs one, is what he said. He is the villain, and every sport needs one. And I remember that. I remember him coming out on the stage and the fans booing him, but him for some reason smiling at that. It was a strange sort of situation, but you quickly learned his place in the sport. You quickly learned how important he was. He was connected to the M&M's 18 yellow race car. You knew him for his 2 championships on track. You knew him for being quite polarizing, as that villain character kind of um, um, lends itself to. And you said it best. You can't cover the sport of NASCAR without covering Kyle Busch and his impact on the sport. I can go on and on about this, but as I'm currently writing and processing this right now, and you try to download all of his accomplishments, you can't do that without acknowledging the fact that he changed 2 NASCAR rules. One was when he was 16, meaning that, and that rule was that NASCAR drivers couldn't race until they were 18 years old in the Truck Series because he was 16 and he was being dominant. And then later, uh, NASCAR prohibited Cup drivers from driving in the Xfinity Series, which is now known as the O'Reilly Series, and the Truck Series below them because he was dominant in those series as well. He was so good that NASCAR literally had to change their rules. Um, that's just where my mind immediately goes when you talk about Kyle Busch on the track. He was inescapable. He was inescapable.
What are you working on regarding Kyle Busch? It sounds like you are. I know you cover the Panthers full time, but I'm sure you've been, kind of scrambled into service like many of us. What are you kind of looking at in terms of Kyle Busch's death tonight for tomorrow's paper?
Yeah. I'm looking at a lot of things. Like I said, downloading his legacy is quite difficult. Even just trying to figure out, okay, which fights were most important that he got in that I need the paper of record to write about. I say that in jest. It is a very tragic moment. But this is just how I'm processing this.
His on track legacy, and I think you're paraphrasing of columnist Scott Fowler's words. He's NASCAR's villain right now, and every sport needs one. I think the sport absolutely needed Kyle Busch to play that part throughout his 22 years at times, because maybe there was a dip in the amount of characters that were in the sport, and he provided that week in and week out at the track. Whether you liked him or not. But I think what we're seeing, Alex, is whether you liked him as a driver or not, as fans or even other drivers, you're seeing like a lot of emotion and kind of a unified heartbreak over this.
Absolutely. It is heartbreaking. It is so tragic. And the more I think about this, you asked what I'm kind of working through right now. His connection to Dale Earnhardt was always strong. There were always so many parallels between him and the Intimidator. Among those, Dale Earnhardt needed a long time to win his first Daytona 500, despite the fact he's on the Mount Rushmore of racing. It took him a long time to win the Daytona 500. Kyle Busch didn't win one. And that was something that was always cropping up. The fact that Kyle Busch was a no prisoners driver, or a take no prisoners driver, just like Dale Earnhardt was. The fact that Kyle Busch ran for Richard Childress Racing, who was the car owner that took a chance on Dale Earnhardt, and ultimately won 6 Cup championships with him. There are just all these parallels, and it's difficult to not acknowledge the parallel right now. The fact that the sport and the world was robbed of Dale Earnhardt Sr. too soon, and now the world is robbed of Kyle Busch too soon. And it's difficult to explain. It's difficult to fathom. But the two fates are intertwined. At least is how I see it.
Next final question, and I don't know your assignment for the weekend or not. I don't know if you'll be there, but I know you have been to Charlotte Motor Speedway, and there's racing tomorrow. Kyle Busch would have been in that trucks race. What do you think this weekend will be like at the track?
I can't really imagine. It's going to be somber. I imagine it's going to be comparable to other times when NASCAR has lost someone really important and really close to the NASCAR family. And I'm not just saying in Rockingham, February 2001, after Dale Earnhardt died in the 2001 Daytona 500. There have been several other times in which this sport has had to grieve and come together to do so. The one that's coming to mind is when Ty Gibbs's father died in Phoenix a couple years ago, and that really put that championship race day into a very somber perspective. And I imagine it's going to feel something like that. But every time I ask drivers, ask people in history about how the sport has gotten through tragedy before, it has always been, we're racers. Racing on the oval is what we do. That's the only thing we do. That's the only thing we know how to do. This is how we grieve. And the racing will go on because that is just what racers do. And Kyle Busch was the ultimate one. He was the unapologetically and glorious racer that NASCAR will probably never, there will never be another Kyle Busch because there was never one before him either.
Alex Zietlow, well said as always from the Charlotte Observer. Thank you for joining us tonight.